Hello, this is Dirk Esterline, and I wrote the stories for level 1 and 2 of Nuestra Historia, and then just wanted to share with you some ideas and some things that I do when I use the stories in class. So this is typically how I handle a story from Nuestra Historia. Some things that I do differently: if there are a lot of new words to the students in the historieta, I may split it up into two and do two classroom stories with my students and come up with actions for one set of words, do a class created story, and then on another day you take the remaining words, do actions for those, and then do another class created story before I head to the historieta in Nuestra Historia. Okay, so I was going to show you an example of Unit 2, Historieta 3 from Level 1, and here's an example of, first, just looking at the different words that come up in the story. So we've got alto, bajo, bebe, trabaja, and besa la mejilla. So first thing that I do is come up with some little actions to use with the students to help them practice the meanings and get those in their brain before we go into the story. And so alto, will hold our hand up and pretending like we're measuring a tall person, and bajo will hold our hand down as if we were measuring a short person. Baby's super simple. We just pretend like we're drinking something. Usually for trabaja, we'll pretend like we've got a shovel and that we're digging. And besa la mejilla, this one actually is a couple things that's kind of cool about this is a lot of times you can take different words and combine them into one structure, and that way you can learn more than one word at once with just one action. And this one is specifically, we talk about the cultural significance of kissing the cheek as a greeting and how the students usually find that to be very different. So normally for this one is I'll have them take their left hand and make a fist, and then pretend that that fist is someone else's cheek, and then we'll pretend to kiss the cheek. And we talk about how you don't actually put your lips on the cheek and stuff. So it adds some culture, plus it gets the word besa and mejilla combined together into just one structure that we can learn with just one action. So that's what we'll do first, and then after we've practiced the gestures a few times, a lot of times I'll have them close their eyes and then do the gestures for me while I go through them and mix them up, just to be sure that the students all know the words really well. After I feel that the students have got the words down, that they know the meanings and they'll be able to understand them if we use them in a story, then we'll create a story together in class using the words that's different from the story that shows up in Nuestra Historia, in Historieta 3. So here's an example of one we did in class where we had a witch that was working at Walmart, and there was a man that came in who was very attractive, and she liked him and got very excited and kissed him on the cheek, but he didn't like her. So then she comes up with a potion and tricks him into drinking it, so that and of course it turns out to be a love potion, so he falls madly in love with her. So we'll do this in class. Usually we'll have actors that will act out the part of the witch and the part of the man. I don't tend to use props, because props I've used in the past, but they tend to distract from the story, and a lot of times you find students playing with the props more than they are paying attention to what's going on in the story. Sometimes we'll do what's called a write and discuss, and this is an example of what the write and discuss would look like. So we would do this story first with kind of just minimal details, and then after we've gone through the story once, I'll bring up the Microsoft Word and on the screen, and then we'll start to type out the story. But as we type out the story, and I'll ask them questions like ask them, what does the witch look like? Is she tall? Is she short? Things like that. And then we'll go in and we'll add more details that we didn't have in the original story. And then once we've created the story with all the extra details, then I'll get the students to go ahead and read it to each other. Sometimes in English, I might, in this example, since we've already gone through it in Spanish together and created it, I might have them work with a partner and each read half. So maybe they'll read one person will read the first paragraph, and then the next will read the second paragraph. And so once we've gone through this, then we're ready to go on to the story. Now this story that we created in class might take a whole day to do, between coming up with the actions and practicing those for the target words, and then coming up with a story and doing the write and discuss for that. So, and we may even end up reading the story the next day in class. So depending on how things go, if it's going great and the students are enjoying the story, then we'll keep working with it until the next day. Once we've created a classroom story together, then we'll move on to the story that comes with Nuestra Historia. So here's a cartoon of Unit 2, Historieta 3. And typically what I like to do is to show them the cartoon and then play the native speaker audio of the story. While I do that, the first time we go through, I tend to push the pause button a lot and try to slow things down and give them the chance to really understand the story. After we've listened to it once, the next thing that I really like to do is to look at the cartoon with the students, point at the pictures, and then ask as many questions as I can. For example, looking at the first section of the story here, we would ask, okay, what's the name of the man? Is the man short or is he tall? Is he handsome? If we've already learned clothing items, I might ask is he wearing a sweater, and is he wearing a tie? Different questions like that. Might ask what color hair he has, and then we'd talk about the woman as well. Is she tall? Is she short? So trying to bring out the details of the story, but at the same time adding extra details and asking more questions to really give them a good understanding of the story. Once we've done that, we've gone through all the different cartoons, then I'll go ahead and I'll play the story for them again one more time, this time without any pauses. Next, we'll do some of the different activities that come with the story. Here's an example of one that we have to put the sentences in order according to what they heard. Now, they've already heard the story once while they looked at the cartoon. We discussed the story by looking at the cartoon and pointing out different things in the pictures and asking questions about the pictures. And then we listened to it again without any pauses. So now they're pretty capable of looking at the sentences and putting them in the order that they go in. Here's another activity that goes along with Historieta 3, and so we would also do this one. I might have them do both activities, one together online, or do one at a time and then discuss them together and ask them questions. But that gives us two activities that they're pretty capable of answering the questions to after having heard the story a couple of times. One of the last activities I like to do is to do a close activity where they have to take an incomplete story and fill in the missing words. We've listened to the story a couple of times, we've discussed the cartoon, we've done a couple activities, so at this point they're ready to be able to do this, and usually they do really well. They may have one or two words that they're missing, but normally they can complete it quite easily. I will have them work on their own for 5 or 10 minutes and see what they can do, and then I'll pair them up with a partner. And the way I like to have them check their answers is have them read to each other in Spanish, usually dividing the story into two parts. And so one person will read one half and the other person would read the other half in Spanish. When they get to a blank, if they're stuck on that blank and they don't know what to fill in, then their partner can help them fill it in. And if neither one of them know, they can ask the teacher and we can do that together. Finally, I'll show them the completed story. I'll have the words underlined that they needed to fill in the close activity. And then again, with their partner, we'll divide it in half. But this time, since they've already read it in Spanish, I'll have them read it to each other in English. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this and this was helpful. I hope you're enjoying the stories from Nuestra Historia and that your students are learning a lot of Spanish. Thank you.